Next up, I'd like to introduce Ian Atkinson, Sleepy Giant's VP of Product Management. Sleepy Giant has been around for over 7 years, providing back-end game technology and solutions to some of the industry's most notable game developers and publishers. Ian has been in the games business for almost 10 years and has been primarily focused on emerging markets. Before Sleepy Giant, Ian worked at Playnomics, now a Unity company, THQ, and spent 6 years in investment banking covering digital entertainment companies in China and the US. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm just going to hold this. Well, thank you very much. I'm super excited to be here today to moderate this panel of exceptional executives in the mobile gaming space. I'm super excited. I think mobile game up higher. Sorry. I think it's a super exciting time for mobile games. I've been around technology for a while, and typically games leads the innovation in markets, and I think we're seeing that right now with some of the things that we're facing around acquisition, engagement, retention, monetization. So I think it's an exciting time to talk to the publishers and understand how they're solving some of the problems that are going to drive innovation and business models in the future. So just real quick, we have a brief outline of things that we'd like to cover. To level set, get an understanding of where the market's come in the last couple of years. Talk a little bit about what these guys are doing to bring value to publishers. And to players, what dynamics we're seeing in the markets, what matters, what's going to push the market forward, and then talk a little bit about what factors these guys are looking for when they look at developers. And then we've got Tim Harris here from Industrial Ties, and we can talk from a developer's perspective and see what things they look at from evaluating publishers. So with that, because we don't want to hear me talk, let me turn it over to these guys. They can do a quick introduction, then we'll get right into it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Malaperiman from Roadhouse Interactive, formerly a developer, became a publisher and supporter of publishing services recently. I've been in the games business for 22 years. I started off in console with Electronic Arts, then did something called the N-Gage with Nokia, which was a fantastic success, and ever since then been doing my own thing and working with Roadhouse. Don't let N-Gage put you off about my abilities, of course.
I'm Walter Driver. I'm the CEO of Scopely. We're a Los Angeles-based publisher. Has launched 4 #1 free games on the iPhone in a row, and delivered over 25 million downloads in the last 18 months to third-party developers.
Giordano Contestabile, I'm VP of Product Management and Revenue at Tilting Point. We're a partner for independent game developers. We provide funding and a series of services. So far we launched 2 games, Leo's Fortune, that won an Apple Design Award, and Toy Rush, that developed by Uber Entertainment in Seattle. Been in mobile games for 15 years, and I'm much more happy since the launch of the App Store in 2008.
Hi, I'm Barry Dorf, Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances. Game publisher. We're a public company in Japan, pretty big company.
I'm Tim Harris. I'm the President of Industrial Toys. We're a developer focused on creating mobile games for core gamers. And I'm realizing as I'm talking that you should know, and it's relevant, that I went to Motley Crue's farewell tour last night, so my voice is probably going to go out as I talk. But I normally have a deep, booming voice.
Great. Awesome. So, is that okay? So, we've got a great panel. Let's jump into it. Why don't we start with just a quick level set. Maybe we could talk about where the industry has come over the last 2 years. A lot has happened, and it'd be interesting just to kind of get an understanding of how things have progressed. Barry, why don't we start off with you? If you could give us your quick thoughts on how the industry perspective, how it's progressed.
Well, I mean, I think 20 months ago, DNA had the #1 and 2 top grossing games on both iOS and Android, and the world was kind of a different place back then. Getting your apps into the top of the charts, getting your apps into the top grossing, figuring out what users, how they were playing, how they were evolving as gamers, and learning about how free to play actually was the dawn of the age that we're in right now. And since then, I think times really have changed. There's been, there's 3 top players. There's Supercell, there's Gung Ho, and there's King, and they make up 60% of the App Store on the top grossing. And then there's about 10 companies that make up 30%, and then the indies make up the other about 10%, and that's changing dramatically today even. So the top 60% is growing, the 30% is getting smaller, and we're kind of tapping into that 10%. So these indies that were growing 2 years ago, it's harder and harder for them to break into the marketplace today, much harder than it was 2 years ago.
Walter, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this as pretty much any content ecosystem matures, the market gets more inhospitable to new entrants. Its global complexity is rising, the cost of distribution is going up, and when you see new developers trying to enter the market with a game that is in a category where there's already established competitors, they're starting with a much lower LTV than guys like Supercell or King in that category, because they're 2 years behind in terms of developing content and optimizing and tuning the game economy, and they have much higher CPIs to acquire users because they don't have the same kind of performance marketing infrastructure. They haven't tuned the machine around those games, and they don't have any marketing leverage or with partners, and they have no footprint. So they have, they're getting squeezed at both ends, and so really the only way that new players are emerging is by doing something that is so orthogonal to the market and the established genres that it kind of blows up that math. And I think we're seeing that if new entrants compete head on with existing players, it's very difficult to win.
Cool. Hey, Giordano, so in terms of the publishing model, you've been in this for a while with Glue, obviously. Has there been any major shifts in how publishers are approaching the market, especially from a mobile perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the reasons why we don't even call ourselves a publisher is because publishers have kind of a bad reputation in the industry for independent developers. And having spent a few years at EA, I can also understand them. But anyway, a few things have shifted, I think. Well, first, it's true that the market is dominated by a few players, but still, if you look at the number 100 grossing up right now on iOS, is doing about 30K a day, which if you can keep it going for 1 year, that means a $10 million run rate. And Android is basically, getting closer and closer to iOS in terms of revenue. That means that even if you're not in the top 10, you can still have a pretty successful business, right? And it's true that the market is dominated by a few players, but those players were non-existent or very small or independent just a few years ago, right? So it's the first time that the market, that there is a mobile market that completely disintermediated the old, if you want, publishers, and is now open to everyone. On the other hand, production values are rising. As Walter was saying, people expect you to compete with the best in class. So they don't care if Clash of Clans has been out for 2 years. They want you to be as good as Clash of Clans. User acquisition costs are rising. You might be spending now $2-3 per user, and that netally adds up. So it's true that the market is open. It's also true that you probably need to have A, funding, and B, someone that understands user acquisition and live operations and analytics and a bunch of stuff that are not necessarily in the purview of a traditional independent developer. So it's I would say it's a mixed bag. It's an open market, but it's an open market that is very, very, very competitive.
Interesting. Tim, curious to get your thoughts on the other side, coming from, when you started making your game back a couple of years ago and thinking about publisher versus going it alone. Have you seen a transformation, or are you having conversations, or you still pretty much forward thinking on doing it yourself?
Yeah, no. So yeah, we are doing it ourselves. We have a game that is a shooter built from the ground up for touch called Midnight Star. It's in soft launch right now. So we're right in the middle right on the cusp of experiencing all the things that I've been warned about across the last 2 years. Walter, that made me. I was thinking, Walter and I've had this conversation a few times, and it's true. It feels like the only way that you can actually make a disruption right now is to blow up the math that's like set. And so we've gotten lots of advice on both sides of the coin. We've gotten lots that said, you need a publisher, you're going to need the clout, you're going to need the resources, you're going to need the focus, all those things that we have little tidbits of, but we certainly are not by any stretch of the imagination world class in. because that's not what we're focused on. We're a developer, so we have little tidbits of knowledge, and we're going to take a crack at those tidbits of knowledge and hope we put together a winning formula. But even as I say it, it sounds like, wait a minute, hold on, why wouldn't you focus completely on that? And we're doing a couple different things with the product in order to attempt that blow up. But there's no question that right now, on the cusp of going into our full launch, we know that we're going to take a bunch of lumps, and we know that we're going to learn a ton. But part of it for us is we're in an okay position to be able to take those lumps, look at the things that we learn, and then have that kind of, all right, do we need to be doing what we're doing this way or going into a publishing relationship, which I'm sure a bunch of you guys would argue we should be in a publishing relationship, but it ends up coming for us down a lot to the math, and whether the math works out from a revenue share standpoint, from a what we give up versus what we maintain standpoint. So we ultimately did opt to go it alone. You know, you guys can all make fun of me in 6 weeks based on how that goes.
Yeah, I think one big shift that we've seen is developers kind of changing their perspective on the math, as Tim was saying. I think 18 months ago, people were saying, like, how much am I giving up? How much am I getting? Is this worth 30%? Is this worth 50%? What is it worth? I think now people seem to be coming out and thinking, it's a pretty binary thing. I either want to be in the top 75, 100 grossing, or I'm not going to keep working on this game anyway. And so who gives me the best chance of being in there? And given all the moving parts, are we going to get featured by Apple or Google? What's our China strategy? What are we doing in Japan and Korea? How are we localizing? Who are we activating on day one? Do we have the performance marketing infrastructure to be able to scale and measure performance across a lot of different cohorts of users? Do we have custom analytics built in to track those cohorts? That starts to get a little overwhelming, and people think, if I have a 10 times higher chance of being in the top 100, what is that worth, rather than it's a finite amount of revenue that we are splitting. I think people are focused much more on the size of the total pie than the rev share these days, and I think we're going to see forward-looking developers coming to publishers and actually thinking about being much less aggressive in their economic negotiations, because they understand actually the more money the publisher's making, the more resources that they're going to get, and the bigger that pie is likely to be.
Any other comments? Barry?
I mean, you guys are talking about math, right? So you guys want to be in the top 100 grossing, and there's 10,000 apps that are coming out, let's say, every month. So 1% of those are going to be in the top 100. And as Giordano said, that's going to put you at a run rate of, let's say, close to 10 million a year. But is that the business you really want to be in, or is it the business you really want to be in to hit the top 10, to hit the top 5? Do you want to have the next Kardashian game, or do you want to have the next game that's at number 100 that no one here can name right now? So as a publisher, if you really want huge success, that's when you go after the size and scope of working with somebody like us. If you're just trying to hit a single or a double, then you might not necessarily need to go with a publisher. But I don't know anyone in here that really wants to hit a single or a double, right?
Tim loves hitting singles.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I was like, that's pretty good for my batting.
So does Excel.
yeah, but please don't make the next Kardashian game. One is enough.
If I can just add, I agree with what Barry's saying. I think there is still space. You don't have to be in that top 20, that top 50 to make a sustainable business. Some of the guys here have got big pockets, and they can support developers and make sure that you can get into that top 10. We've seen some of our partners make a considerable amount of money, enough for a mid-sized developer to say, listen, we've covered our costs, we're now making some money, and they've been in the top 20, top 50 in a category. So I don't think you have to be top 10. And as we've seen, that the top 10, the top 20 is absolutely dominated by these big mega publishers. So there's definitely some play for that middle ground, and guess what? That's what I do.
All right, cool. So we've got a market. It's challenging, and maybe we could get into the publishing part of it. And what each of you have a publishing business. You each offer something that's unique and competitive. Maybe we could talk about the things that you're doing to bring value to help developers overcome a lot of the issues that you're mentioning. Nick, since you got the microphone, why don't you just kind of talk about the things that you need to cover?
We definitely believe that a developer needs to maintain their IP. You've worked hard to build that IP. You want to keep hold of that IP. You don't want to give up a ton of your revenue. You want to give up some, of course, because you're paying or working with other companies to provide a service. But we've certainly seen that a lot of companies have come to us saying, listen, Nick, we don't necessarily have revenue up front. We've got a really good game. We believe it monetizes well. We have a look at that. We either agree or disagree with them. And then we take them on a journey. That journey is not one where they're giving up 50, 60% of revenue. It's a much smaller amount of that, and it's a fee-based system. So you basically pick and choose which services you feel you need, guided by the team I work with, which is everything from working with Apple and Google, who we know very well, to working on the social media strategy and ultimately the UA strategy. What we try and do is reduce the upfront costs for developers, defer some of those costs, and ultimately say to people, listen, we're going to partner with you. It's going to be a fee-based system, and we're going to talk in terms of 2, 3, 4, 5% of revenue when that company is profitable. So a very different model that I'm sure will be challenged by my friends here, but something that just a bit different to offer developers out there.
And then how do you prioritize amongst the various games that you are working with?
Great question. We spend a lot of time doing the same as you guys, where developers will come to us with an outstanding game. It could be a concept on paper. We prefer to have seen a prototype before then. We're then looking at, okay, who are the guys behind this? What have they done before? Have they got experience of working in probably free-to-play? Have they got experience of working in mobile? And then looking, okay, do they have the expertise within their group? Do they have somebody who's an artist who can help build a fantastic trailer? Some of the HD assets we need. What's the actual non-development skill set in that company, and try and fill in the blanks where they don't have that skill set.
Yeah, I would say we're sort of at the opposite end of that spectrum. I think we're not interested in 2% of any game. We want to have long-lasting, multi-year relationships, hopefully multi-year relationships with a handful of elite studios. There's a lot of overhead that involves in getting up to speed, starting a live game as a service between two different companies. And so we want to work with a handful of partners over a long period of time. And the floor for us would be sort of that $1 million a month mark that Giordano was talking about. We wouldn't really want to engage with any product that we didn't think that had a baseline there. And we provide game design resources, analytics, SDK that helps measure every single thing that happens inside the game, managing strategic BD relationships, including IP licenses or celebrity involvement like the Kardashians. We're based in LA, so we have easy access to all that kind of stuff. Advertising of and monetization of non-paying users. We have an ads SDK that helps monetize non-paying users at 2 to 5 times what we see independent developer partners. And we distribute the game to our network of over 35 million registered users, and do all the marketing around the game on an ongoing basis for years. So it's an intimate, ongoing relationship, and you want to find somebody you think you can work with over a long period of time, and that it's going to make sense for their business and yours.
So rather than make a list of what we provide, I wanted to just focus on a couple of things that I think we're going differently, because I think it might be interesting for the audience. We do a lot of user acquisition, naturally. Performance-based marketing is important, but we also rely a lot on other forms of marketing. So, for example, we launched Leo's Fortune on Android a couple of weeks ago, and we premiered this live action trailer, which was a huge Rube Goldberg machine, which basically was this huge machine that was built to simulate the game environment. It was very expensive, took about 70 takes to shoot, but it was awesome, and got 2 million views on YouTube so far. The game launched on Android in Italy, not only for the trailer, but the trailer surely got a lot of press and interest, and we also saw an uplift on iOS sales. So we doubled iOS sales for the first couple of weeks where the trailer was out. That to us, there are 2 reasons why we do that. One is because performance marketing is increasingly expensive, and we want to find other ways for people to discover our game. And B, because we want to build brands, we want to build franchises over time. Also, we also partner with developers on a multi-year, multi-game agreement usually. And we want to build big brands. And I don't think you can build a brand by buying your users one by one. So you need to also spend money to make sure that people know what the game is about and people feel an emotional connection to the game rather than just doing performance marketing. So that's probably the thing that we're doing that is more different from Walter said. We do everything also. And then we provide full funding, which I think is also important because we shift, in most cases, the financial risk from the developer to us, which for independent developers is important, I think, because even the most successful independent developers are usually just 1 or 2 games away from going out of business because that's the nature of the business. You know, this is a very competitive platform, and even the best performers, on average, succeed once every 3 games, which for a small company, it's a big risk to take. So we try to help there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that performance marketing has kind of become table stakes, I think, to compete in this space. And I think most people think of user acquisition as like, I pay people to send me users. I think the level of sophistication that you would see inside of the guys that are spending millions of dollars a month in terms of, you know, adjusting their bids at different times of the day across different device types in different countries, you know, based on different demographic profiles, you know, within hours of measuring that channel, recalibrating bids dynamically. It's pretty sophisticated technology that's powering the performance marketing inside of a lot of these organizations, but that's just blocking and tackling now. And I think you're going to see a lot more of this offline marketing that we're talking about right now starting to also be table stakes, running television campaigns, working with celebrities, influencers, you know, creating spectacles and trailers. Those are the kind of things that you need to do to break out of the pack. And that's a big financial risk for a developer who has already invested a lot of capital and time into a single game and may not have another game coming out for quite a while. So it's another area where I think we're going to see publishers start to provide value in creating offline sensations.
That's a big change from a couple years ago, too. A couple years ago, it wasn't table stakes. That was the advice that everybody had, was just do your paid UA and you're good. Talk about your game 2 days before it comes out. Don't try to build an ecosystem around it or demand for it because it can't be done. We got a lot of that advice, and I completely agree. Now, all of a sudden, it's going back to building brands, like you said, Giordano.
Well, we take a very different tact than you guys. I mean, we don't focus on the marketing, and the reason is you know, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been a publisher in mobile for 5 years now. We were pretty much the first ones doing it at NG Moco. We have, just with everything that we learned with the experience, we think of it as a 3-step process, where step 3 is the marketing, but step 1 is really just a list of best practices, right? I mean, there's just things that everyone needs to know. There's minimum specs you need to have. There's a button placement. There's the way you set up your shop. There's just basic learning that we've done for 5 years that everyone needs to know, and that all our partners are gonna need this sort of information that they just want to have at their disposal. So since my team's taken over kind of the third-party, second-party team at DNA, we've met with over 3,600 developers, and that's not an exaggeration, and we'll be at 3,700 after this show. And we work with about 10 or 15 of them. And the reason we work with so few is we keep talking about the math. And that leads me to step 2. So after the best practices, we're going to teach you about monetization. So everything that we've learned in Japan they monetize, you know, $3, $5 ARPDAUs, 15% paying. We've taken that learning and that knowledge and brought it here. Our platform on average is around 50 cents a user on average. And we need the certain type of game and a certain type of developer to work with to teach that monetization to, because we're not looking for the singles or doubles. We're a bigger company. We're looking for different stuff in the marketplace. We're looking for the games that have the opportunities to be home runs with the right team. If they could take all this learning and all this knowledge and put it to work in their games and get to a 20, 30, 40 cent ARPDAU and run events and see that hit $1. And my Transformers game hit $2 ARPDAU last month. So we can do this stuff, and you're one of the people we met with. You're one of the 36. Should come talk to us again. But step 3, really, that's the marketing comes after you've actually done everything you possibly can to make your game as good as it possibly can be, and then we can talk about all the marketing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Barry does make a good point that if you don't have the KPIs you need to compete, the marketing doesn't matter, and there's really no getting around that. If you have an inferior product from a metric standpoint, no amount of marketing is going to solve that problem. And I think all of the best folks on the publishing front are a lot more involved than I think some developers realize in helping teach those best practices and move metrics and increase LTV significantly over time.
Yeah, as an example of something that we're doing that we didn't expect to do, we hire a UX UI designer. She used to work with me at PopCap actually, and because we realized that there is a lot of mobile and free-to-play specific UI and UX learnings that we have from the past years, that it was useful to give to our partners. So as we go, we are becoming, I would say that we're becoming more involved on the product side than we expected when we started 1.5 years ago. And I think that's probably a consequence of what Barry and Walter were saying, that you need to hit those KPIs.
Just one thing to add, totally agreeing with Barry on it's not just about the marketing, but one of the things we see is the massive investment in customer service and also QA. If you're a 5 to 10 man team, it's really tough to manage all of that yourself. So it's not the lack of will amongst the development partners, it's more the lack of resource we see. And that's certainly something that I think people need support on as well.
Great. So we're talking a lot about the numbers, but I think maybe we could just drive a little bit deeper, because obviously it starts with the game and game mechanics, monetization plan. What are the things that I guess it's a two-part question. The first is, what are the things that you guys are offering to developers? Barry mentioned a little bit around best practices, but is there other things that you offer in terms of making the game a complete whole, whether it's live game operations support, back-end infrastructure, game monetization design? Are there things that you can do once you have a game under house that you guys provide to help the developers get to those metrics? Because those metrics don't obviously happen. There's the game. So maybe you could talk about some of the things that you're doing to support developers around the game making part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with understanding what's happening inside the game. So we have an analytics SDK that we integrate into our partner games, where we measure every single event that happens in the game and can measure performance across different subsets of users, be able to identify people that have been playing the game more than 30 sessions and have spent between $10 and $20, and be able to send a targeted promo to them. Those kind of activities can drive buyer conversion significantly up and the average revenue per paying user over time. So we published a game, Slots Vacation, in a very crowded casino category, where just over the last 100 days, we've increased the average revenue per paying user 60%. We have a product manager, a game economist that work with that game team, and a game analyst who are reviewing and pulling queries and looking at data and sharing that data with a developer partner and syncing up every day on the roadmap and how we can tune that game for higher revenues. And we've seen 2 to 3x increase in lifetime value of a user over just a few months. So it's a very hands-on process. If you want a partner to help you, it's not just like, here's general best practices, because those do need to be adapted and crafted. And I think if you think of free-to-play games as airplanes, if airplanes have a lot of moving parts, and if one of them breaks, the whole thing can crash. And if you're a mechanic who's worked on a lot of airplanes, even if you're working on a new kind, you can identify often what's wrong. And I think when you're a product manager who's worked at a publisher across a lot of different games and seen metrics across a whole portfolio of stuff, it's much easier to look into it and understand, okay, the transition from, early game to elder game experience seems to be lacking. We're seeing sort of soft retention between day 14 and day 30. How do we address that and help you prioritize where you spend your time? Because there's so many things you can do on your roadmap.
Yeah, on our side, we usually staff a team on a partner game. The team includes a product manager that basically helps the partner with design, monetization, retention, engagement, etc. UI, UX designer, a data analyst. We also have a proprietary platform, which, by the way, is built by the kind gents at Sleepy Giant. So we staff this in a user acquisition person. But the other thing that we do, I think, which is a bit extra, is we have insight and research division, And we do from the very early stage, from signing a game to launching a game to post-launch, we do a lot of research. And that means focus groups, that means user testing, that means buying research, I mean commissioning custom research, quantitative, qualitative. We try to get as much data as we can and to interpret for our partners and to give actionable suggestions. So much that recently we started, when we suggest a feature or a change, we are now able to attach a projected revenue delta that we think that particular feature or change will drive. So it's all it's all based on market comparison. It's all based on data that we own. So we try to be not only to be as data driven as possible, but also to find data beyond our games, but to find data in the market and in other places that we can then supply to our partners.
So Barry, before you answer this, I got an extra question to throw in there for you as you think about this. But as I listen to all this and I think about my team, and we're a small team, and we basically got our hands full. And I know that like a bunch of the like more sophisticated stuff that you guys have talked about and adding resources to the teams that are smaller, and Barry, I'm sure some of yours are big and some of them are small. How do you help the teams that can't react to all the things that you could possibly provide for them?
Well, we prioritize it for
resources.
you, right? I mean, so, no offense to the guys on the panel, but we've done it probably 100x more than they have. We've been here since the beginning. We have bigger teams, both in Japan and in the West. We do it across hundreds of titles, not a few titles, and it's that learning that takes it up. Like every day that you're in this business, you learn more and more. And if you've got 100 games live in the charts, and you've got 100 games and 100 different teams, whether it's a one-man shop, which we've worked with, to 5-man shops, to 30-man shops, and they all take their own sort of needs and we help direct them. We have, we assign a producer, we assign art, we assign all this stuff, but we don't, we assign it from these huge teams, and we assign it for people that have the experience with multiple games in that genre, so we can give you the best practices across everything, specifically tailored to what you're looking for. And we run into your question all the time about that stuff. So we actually will go through and design out specific features. We'll have game design advisors, producers, artists sitting in your shop, helping you, direct you, and work with you to get this stuff live and launched, and then sit there with the numbers and the analytics until we're all happy with where everything is. And that's kind of why you work with a publisher, right? It's for that sort of information and that learning.
Hey Barry, just I agree with your wonderful respect for the rest of the panel, and acknowledge that you guys have been doing it for many, many years. Between us, we're a great panel. We've done a lot of things for many, many years. But one of the things that we believe in, and maybe you can counteract this, is that we work with 7 to 10 games at a time. We have a dedicated team, so you've got 4 or 5 people really getting really deep into each game. We don't have the same level of experience of you guys, but we're able to really drill down and spend a hell of a lot of time with every game. And to your point, Tim, is actually sit down with that development team and say, okay, listen, here are, again to Barry's point, here are the 10 things we really need to fix in this game. Let's test those and let's continue improving. And we will take the time and the patience to do that, rather than saying, hey, you didn't get those first 3 things right, thanks, but no thanks.
I will say this, Nick, you're a better man than me, that I would never, ever look at a concept doc and approve it. That's a step. We've done that. We've looked at that. Executing on the game loop and actually seeing that in action is what I need to work with the team, because
I agree. I do agree.
Well, you just said you work with concept docs.
I said we sometimes look at concept docs and then tell people to piss off.
Perfect.
All right. All right. Switching a little bit, we're talking a lot about developers that are in the system already. I think it'd be interesting to understand what the key criteria are that you use to evaluate developers. Team, game concept, what are the things that you're looking for? Maybe you could, go through, not list all of them, but just pick the ones that you think are most important when you're evaluating a developer. Do you want to start?
I think we look at who is a viable partner to operate a live game as a service for years to come and be able to scale their team. Do they have the server-side engineering capabilities to run live events? Do they want to build a long-term sustainable business? Are they interested in creating brands? and do they understand the data-driven approach to drive category-leading metrics, and are they doing something that is interesting and innovative, that will excite people in a way that's not derivative? Because I think the reason that we want to work with a distributed network of game developers is because we don't think we have all the best ideas. We think there's a lot of people out there that are doing wild, interesting stuff that would never get greenlit inside of EA or Zynga, but that audiences are interested in. The problem is when you're doing something innovative that's never been done before, and you have none of the learnings that we've been talking about up here, and none of the infrastructure, your chances of being successful are extremely low, because there's a million other things that can go wrong that might sabotage the fact that you have, your game economy could be warped or inflated. You might do a very poor job of distributing the game. You can have all kinds of issues. So if you want to do something really innovative, and you can work with a partner that can sort of make sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do at a world-class level otherwise, and move you closer to that bullseye, that's a really attractive combination. That's what we're looking for when we're working with partners. Somebody's doing something that we wouldn't have done, but that we can take to the next level.
Yeah, for us, we have two approaches. Our primary approach is we maintain a list of developers that we want to work with, and it's based on data. So it's based on historical sales data across platforms, it's based on ratings, it's based on a bunch of other things. Any given time, about 50 companies are in this list, and this includes King and Supercell. So about 20 viable companies are in this list, and instead of sitting and waiting for them to come to us, we go and pitch them. And most of our current partners come out of that, and those are developers that have been around for a long time, they've been successful, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of our core model, and it's simply comes from the assumption that a team that has been successful before on the platform with the same model is more likely to be successful again. The second model, which is more, I would say, is broader, we actually open to see games from pretty much any developer, as long as they have some history of shipping games, if the game is very close to be done. So if a game is just a few months away from being ready, or they think is ready, then we will take a look. And the odds of us greenlighting a game are probably much lower, because it doesn't come from a developer with the same pedigree, but the game is nearly ready, so we can play it, and so that offsets the risk for us. And usually we go back, and either we say sorry, no, and we provide a lot of feedback on why no, or we say, well, yes, but, and but is, this is all the stuff that we need to do to basically get the game there. And usually that means that the game is not actually 3 months away from launch, it's probably 6 months away from launch, but then we work with them to do that. So that's kind of the way we look at the market.
The reason we wanted to work with Tim and his company so much was because it was clear when you first met them how much they were into what they were making, and how much fun they wanted it to be, and how much they cared about the user. And that really is first. It's first about, does the team have the right goals in mind? And we want to help you with everything that you guys don't want to do, right? We want to help you with all that stuff. So, I hate to keep coming back to the math, but it does work out to the math. So does the team have the right makeup, the right drive, and the right desire to get to the numbers that make sense for us to work together? And that's why out of the 3,600 developers, we work with 15 of them, because it's few and far between. I mean, you talked about it's going to take $2 or $3 to get a user into a game. That means your 90-day LTV has to be above $5. That's 0.1% of all games. 0.1% of all games. Is your simple match 3 game that you're pitching me going to be in the top 0.1% of all games? That's what you have to think about when you're coming and talking to a publisher. The math has to make sense for both of us.
So Tim, maybe you could flip it. Hearing what they have to say, what would be your criteria when you're thinking about choosing a publisher, and maybe some of the reasons why you ultimately decided to go along?
Well, this has been interesting for me to listen to, because I knew most of the points that have been made in terms of what's available from publishers, but ultimately we're more of I would call us a side case rather than the representatively speaking from all developers. We're doing some stupid stuff. I mean, we've split our game into 2 different apps. That makes no sense. The Midnight Star is a shooter. It's going to have all the shoot aliens in the face stuff, and then we exported the really nerdy tidbits, the deep story stuff, into a graphic novel app that's called Midnight Rises that can't even go in the Apple Store in the game section. It's got to go in books, even though the two apps talk to each other, and you get treats for being in one or the other, and content opens up, and none of that shit makes sense, right? From a UA standpoint, it's going to be crazy. But our goal was to, I appreciate what you just said, because our goal was to build essentially non-disposable content for mobile. That was what we were setting out to do. We wanted to build something over time. The initial release is only the first of 4 chapters. That makes no sense either. Especially because we have to change engines in the middle of the game now because of UE4, because we're on Unreal 3. So for us, it was more like we were this side case where we needed to figure out a whole ton of things that were sort of unprecedented, and we wanted to own the user. We were very into community, and frankly, the rhetoric around building community as part of the ecosystem of marketing, as part of the ecosystem of your product, was something that I'm hearing more now than I did a year or two ago when we first started thinking about going with the publisher. So there's no downside for me to seeing it. It just didn't work out for us because we had so many other things that we had to concentrate on as opposed to doing a publishing deal. So unfortunately, I don't have a definitive, this is why publishers shouldn't get deals at this point. I don't know. Barry probably didn't call me back. I don't remember what happened. So I would say that actually there's a bunch of good options now. I think the overblown BS that we see out in the press a lot is when people are talking about that there isn't a viable mobile publishing scenario. I think there absolutely is, as evidenced by everybody that's sitting up here on this panel.
Cool. If I can just add to that quickly. So back to my original point about how I understand your guys' business. I know how it works. It's great for a lot of people. To your point, Tim, it's about identifying what is the developer really good at? Obviously, making games. They may also be reasonably good at monetization. They may have a great art team, as I said before, who can create best-in-breed assets. So it's not always a case of doing, hey, there's your publishing deal, take that, here we go. It's actually recognizing the ability and manpower of the developer and responding to that and creating a tailored package that meets that need rather than saying, hey, here's everything. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I can already see from just 2 weeks in soft launch where we're lacking. I mean, some of the things you guys have mentioned today are things that we're like, oops. And we're going to work to fix those during soft launch. Will we be ultimately successful? I don't know. I hope so. But there's definitely things that we've just learned in the first 2 weeks of being out there, being very confident in the gameplay and how fun it is, which is our core competency, but all these other things that we're starting to learn, we're already taking some lumps. Those are good for us, though. I feel like we're learning in a good way because we've got our infrastructure set up so that we can at least react to the data we get. So we're getting the data that we need. I'm sure that it's not nearly as sophisticated as anybody else sitting up on this panel, but it's as much and more than we can react to at this point.
John, do you have something you want to say? No.
Just he was talking about soft launch. One point that came to my mind is as the bar is getting higher, as the market is more competitive, we're seeing longer and longer soft launch periods. So it's now not uncommon to see a game in soft launch for 6 months, and that naturally has a cost. And there is a lot of stuff that you should be doing during soft launch. You need to keep doing UA, but also tweak the game and improve it, etc., etc. So if you're an independent developer, I will advise being realistic with respect to soft launch and thinking that you will probably be in soft launch for a while and you will be spending money without seeing money during the period, which is, you should budget for that because it's pretty important.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left before I want to open up for questions, but maybe as a last question for the panel, just in terms of where the market's going, what are the opportunities for mobile publishing to mature and advance, and where do you see it being in a year from now? Since it's been such a short run so far, I think 2 years, 3 years is probably too far out.
I mean, the beautiful thing is, what is there, 2 billion of these in the market right now, and they say there's going to be 4 or 5 billion in 4 years, and what if they're off by 1 billion? That's still pretty good, right? So the market's only going to get bigger and bigger. So as we mature as a market, as users mature, you're going to see more and more different types of apps. So right now, free-to-play is probably close to 90% of revenue on the App Store. I think in a year or two, I think that can change with Unreal, with Crytek, with all these other engines coming onto the market. There will be different games out there and different models out there. I think the sky's the limit for everyone with the right idea and the right type of game.
I absolutely agree. I also think it's very positive that now there are two viable platforms, iOS and Android, that you can launch your game on, and that makes the audience bigger, but also makes possible to reach niche and different audiences on different platforms. The one thing I will say is that I believe it's true that games will become more, I would say, will have higher production values, deeper game mechanics, and will become more and more, what we traditionally call games. But I don't believe it's true games will become more complex. So I believe there is a misguided, in many cases, view that you need to take a certain genre or a certain kind of game that is successful, make it more complex, and that's kind of the next step on the App Store. But mobile players still want to play short burst games. Still want to play games that are not overly complex. So the game needs to be deeper and better and more engaging, but not necessarily lead to more complex mechanics. The old, if you want, fallacy of players start with casual game and then graduate to hardcore complex games. I don't think that's the case. It's like saying you start reading comics and then you start at one point reading like philosophy books. So I think the App Store will still be dominated by games that are immediate and simple to play.
Just to add to Barry's point, I seem to follow Barry every time. He's a smart guy. I think there's, as well as the growth in the size of the market, I think there are still massive opportunities in the territories we don't speak about every day. People keep talking about BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. I think there are so many countries, having worked at Nokia, where there are a massive penetration of low-end devices. Those people are going to upgrade. They're going to want better content. So I think there's still a massive opportunity in markets that we still don't play properly in.
Great. All right, I'd like to open up for questions. Walter, yeah, let's go ahead.
Hi, Hank Howie, Disruptive, and we do Game of Thrones to say. I'd love to hear from all you guys. How many entities do you guys think are out there? Thank you. I'd love to hear from you guys. How many entities, just that are generally out there, do you think are calling themselves mobile publishers at this point? And then
because you've been in this the longer, so please.
Barry's got a list of 3,600.
642. Everyone's calling themselves a publisher now. I mean, Nick, you guys started as a game developer and went into publishing. I think anyone can be a publisher. I know Backflip's starting to get into publishing. Anyone that's had a successful game thinks they have the secret sauce that can get people into the top charts. They're going to call themselves a publishers, and each one of those are going to add a little bit of value to the right game or right developer. So there's no stop to the number. And look at Nimblebit. They just published a game called Disco Zoo. Right? It wasn't their game. They didn't develop it. Someone went to them with a similar type of game that they had. They loved it. They liked the team. They worked with them. They published it. Right? That's a model that you're going to see all the time. It's just not, those people are going to be quote unquote publishers, but they're in a different realm than the guys on the stage. So it's unlimited to the number of publishers that are going to be out there.
Also depends how you define publishing. I'm seeing PR agencies that say, hey, now we are a publisher. And they basically offer PR, right? And that's it. So it's... No, we do PR too, but we do also a bunch of other stuff. I think for me, a publisher is someone that offers funding and offers a range of services that are everything but the actual making the game, the design of the game. But then, you can have a broader definition.
Just a quick follow-up, and then do you guys have you ever looked at attribution-based rev share deals? And have you also potentially looked at scaling the rev share deal? So in other words, you guys get a lower chunk if the sales don't pan out, you get very little or nothing, and if the sales get really high, you guys take an appropriate share, say 50%.
We're looking at any kind of deal. We don't have any set kind of deals. The math is the math, so it really doesn't matter what what the deal looks like to us, I'll sign anything that makes sense for both sides out the gate.
Yeah, I think we've seen that every developer has their own issues and concerns, their own financial situation, their own existing portfolio and revenue streams or lack thereof, and their different priorities. And I think if you don't have a flexible approach and you have a standard deal, you lose a lot of value for both sides. So we approach every conversation with a completely open mind about what makes sense for both parties.
I think we have maybe time for one more question if there's anybody who has a question. If not, yeah.
So all you guys are kind of unified in making a pretty good case for the true indie having.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
All you guys are reasonably unified in making the case that it's harder and harder for a true indie to, survive or do well. Is there a devil's advocate version of that? Just because. Just struck me as you guys are all kind of arguing reasonably the same thing with, different finer points.
Flappy Bird.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think you just got to think about what you want as a developer. Tim was making the point earlier that they're learning a lot in soft launch, and those learnings are valuable. And I think Barry's point is every time you launch a game, every day you're in market, you're learning. And so some people are just farther down the path than others along different vectors in terms of learning how to do things and make a game successful. So if you want to focus on building great games and that's your passion, maybe it makes sense to let somebody else who's 3, 4, 5 years into mobile publishing that has global infrastructure and access to a lot of capital handle those things that you're not going to be world class at. If you want to learn how to do those things and you want to go raise $10 million plus and hire 100 people and build a global publishing infrastructure, then you should start learning that as quickly as possible because you're behind. But you may not be behind in crafting the great game experience that you've been planning for the last couple of years. So it just depends on, do you want to build a dominant global publisher yourself or not? And I think we're moving into the stage of the market where if that's not something that you want to do, like those learnings that you would have from launching on your own, you could learn much faster from working with somebody else who could accelerate that learning curve and de-risk it for you.
I think the prime example, that's Machine Zone, right? So they started out as a small game developer. They went, they chugged, and they had a big vision and plan in mind. And what did they do? They went out, they raised $10 million and hired 100 people.
I think there's enough of these wonderful panels like this, and there's tons of information out there. There's definitely tried, tested, true ways of launching a game, and everybody discusses it. People are very, very open. I think most of the time I find with developers, they just don't have the manpower. They know how to do it. They've got it in their heads. They know the stages, and it's just the manpower. So there's nothing stopping you from launching your own game, but it's like, do you have the time and the resources to do it?
Let me just have one closing remark. And I think we'll all agree, it has to be a collaboration, right? So if you're expecting a magic bullet from us, it's not going to happen. All the best relationships with publisher and developer comes with collaboration and people, equal effort from both sides.
Cool. All right, thank you.